High sensitivity is one of my favorite things to talk about on the channel, and every time I do, I am amazed by the overwhelmingly positive and often grateful responses in the comment section. It seems like so many people feel seen after learning that they're a highly sensitive person, and this can be a great starting point to understanding yourself better and learning how to take good care of yourself and keep feeling good even when the world gets overwhelming. And I know exactly what that's like because I felt the same way when I learned about being a highly sensitive person around 7 years ago. So today I want to add more to the conversation and share 10 things that I feel every highly sensitive person should know. So if you know you're a highly sensitive person too, or you're thinking you might be, if you've ever heard people tell you that you need to stop being so sensitive, or that you need to toughen up or stop overreacting, then this video is for you. Quick disclaimer before we get into the 10 things. I am making this video as someone who is a highly sensitive person myself. I've read and learned a lot about it in the recent years, and I've made a bunch of videos about it on this channel, but I am not a doctor and I'm not a healthcare professional. So this is me sharing my personal experiences and what I've learned about high sensitivity. And if you have any health-related questions, then I recommend talking about them with your doctor. Number 1, high sensitivity is a real trait that 15 to 20% of all people are born with. Highly sensitive people are more sensitive to stimuli. That's what it boils down to. So both from our direct environment, think of sounds, smells, crowds, or strong lights, as well as internal stimuli like emotions, pain, or other physical sensations. We are more responsive to our direct environment, we notice things more strongly, and our brain processes that information more deeply. And we now know that there are actual differences in how our brain and nervous system works when compared to non-highly sensitive people. The trait of high sensitivity has been well researched now, and scientifically it is known as sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. We also know of more than 100 species in the animal kingdom that have a highly sensitive minority, like fish, birds, monkeys, and even fruit flies. This research suggests that it's an evolutionary trait that increases the chances of survival for a species, because that more sensitive minority can more easily spot danger, like predators, as well as opportunity, like food sources. High sensitivity is found equally in both genders, and it is not a disorder or diagnosis or something that you have and that you need to be cured from. It simply means that your brain and nervous system functions a bit differently and that they process stimuli more deeply, meaning that you are more sensitive to things. For example, they found a stronger activation in parts of their brain responsible for visual and sensory information processing, empathy, and action planning, as well as differences in how our brain processes serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. We also have more active mirror neurons, which is why we have so much empathy. High sensitivity also exists on a spectrum, so even within that 15 to 20% of all people who are highly sensitive, there is a difference between those of us on the higher end of that spectrum and those of us on the lower end of it. All that to say that high sensitivity, or sensory processing sensitivity, the scientific term, is a real thing that some people are born with, and it is not something that we need to fix, and it is not something that's made up. So when someone tells us to just relax or toughen up, or stop being so sensitive, or why are you so fussy, there's nothing that we can do with that. We cannot turn our sensitivity off. It's like telling someone to stop being tall or to stop having green eyes. We cannot change how our brain works, so it is important to know that some of our challenges come from society just not always being set up for sensitivity, and not because there's anything wrong with us. In fact, high sensitivity comes with many gifts as well, and I will talk more about that later. Number 2, we're all uniquely different. Every highly sensitive person is still a uniquely different person. We are not all the same, and we are not all shy or quiet or introverted, although some of us might be. Research shows that the male-female ratio of HSPs is 50-50, and also that while most of us are introverted, 30% of HSPs are extroverted. Some of us are a bit more quiet, while others are more outgoing. Some of us hate watching violent movies, and others love watching gory horror fests or going bungee jumping. So for me, when I first learned about being a highly sensitive person, it was a huge light bulb moment, and I finally started to understand things about myself that I never really understood before. So it is not an exaggeration to say that this changed my life. But at the same time, highly sensitive person doesn't have to be a label that defines you and who you are. You are still uniquely yourself. We're all different, and you don't have to change the things that you like, for example, simply because you've learned that you're a highly sensitive person. Number 3, being highly sensitive comes with many advantages. It took me a while, but I now see my high sensitivity not as a burden, but as a gift, because while it is true that it can be difficult if you get overwhelmed and overstimulated so easily, I wouldn't change it for the world, because it also helps me to experience all the beautiful things about life much more deeply too. Because of how our brain works, being highly sensitive comes with many advantages. One example is that we experience sensory pleasures much more strongly than the majority of people. We respond more strongly to subtle tastes and smells, the feeling of warm water on your skin when you're taking a shower, or for example, touch. I love it so much when my boyfriend gives me a little shoulder rub. It helps so much. We also connect very strongly with things like art, music, nature. We feel it deep in our soul. It's like you're experiencing life in overdrive, and that is very special and one of my personal favorite things about being highly sensitive. But also take communication. We have an advanced ability to read other people's expressions and body language, subtle changes in someone's demeanor. We have a lot of empathy, and we are able to forge deep connections with others. Highly sensitive people are often very creative. We can come up with out-of-the-box solutions for problems, which is very helpful in work situations. We have a strong intuition, often knowing things without really knowing how we know them, and we can be very funny because of our creativity and our tendency to introspect. I know that it can be very challenging sometimes to be so sensitive all the time, but please don't forget all these wonderful advantages as well. Number 4, it's okay to plan ahead and make things easier for yourself. Because of the fact that our highly sensitive brain is constantly taking in a ton of detailed information and processing all of that very deeply, it also means that we can feel exhausted and drained a lot more quickly. So when you are able to accept that about yourself, then you can also try to plan ahead and make things easier, which is absolutely okay. I always make sure I bring things that I might need in my backpack when I go out, like something to drink and something to eat in case I get hungry, because we're also more sensitive to things like thirst and hunger. Sunglasses, chapstick, whatever I might need to feel good. If you have to go somewhere, it is perfectly okay to try and schedule some breaks in between where you can cool off, or go when it's less crowdy. You can schedule a self-care day for yourself every once in a while, or one of my favorite tips, if you have an appointment, to make sure that you arrive like 30 minutes early for your appointment, so you can just kind of be by yourself, cool off before your appointment begins. I love going to concerts, and yes, that is very overwhelming. So if the concert is far away, I will book a hotel room so that I can take a little nap before the concert starts. I can feel well rested there, and also afterwards just walk back to my hotel and get a good night's sleep, instead of then also having to take a crowded night train back home. And yes, this does make it more expensive, so it means that I will only do this for bands that I'm actually like a big fan of. But this way I can still do what I love. I can actually enjoy the concert feeling good and take good care of myself. My point is, you're not being difficult or high maintenance or a drama queen if you take some time to plan ahead and make things easier for yourself. We do get overstimulated very easily, but we also recover nicely when we take some time for it. So If you can make things easier by bringing what you need and taking breaks and having some time to rest afterwards, that is perfectly okay, and it helps so much. Number 5, stimuli won't bite and you will survive. Which brings me to my next point, and that is that stimuli won't bite. So even if you are a highly sensitive person, that doesn't mean that you have to avoid highly stimulating environments altogether. It might be very tempting to try and avoid highly stimulating environments altogether and not go, to those concerts or not go to places that might be crowded. But you don't have to. You can just keep living your life doing what you love, as long as you take care of yourself and bring what you need. Like I said, take those breaks, maybe preferably alone by yourself in a calming environment like your bedroom, drink a cup of tea, read a book. These things help, and you can just keep living your life too. Number 6, it is okay to crave a slower, simpler life. Because our brain processes all that information so deeply, HSPs may take a bit longer to do things. We need more time than non-HSPs. And for example, a lot of us don't like timed challenges because we feel like we cannot take our time and we will perform much worse than if we're not being timed. So we might need a bit more time for certain tasks or for getting ready in the morning slowly. We may need more time to make decisions, even simple things like what to wear or what to make for dinner, because in our head we're thinking very deeply, we're processing all of those options and we're weighing all of the pros and cons. We also tend to think very deeply about the big things in life, like direction or purpose. Questions like, why are we here? Who are we? How do we want to impact others? We crave meaning and fulfillment. So it's no wonder that many HSPs don't like high-paced work environments, or that we like to wake up a little bit earlier so that we can have more time to slowly get ready in the morning. And those things are perfectly okay. Number 7, empathy is one of your gifts, but it's okay to also set emotional boundaries. Highly sensitive people have an immense capacity for empathy, and it is no wonder that many of us choose professions where we can help others, like teaching or therapy. We are highly affected by the emotions of others, and instead of just noticing what someone else is feeling, many of us actually feel that too in our own body, and we can walk into a room and immediately sense discomfort, tension, joy. So sometimes that can be tiring because we're constantly absorbing all of those emotions of other people. And that is where emotional boundaries can be very helpful. For example, you have a right to prioritize self-care, and just because you can sense what other people are feeling, that doesn't mean that you have to also take on that emotional burden for yourself. Try to realize that everyone has their own life to live and that their emotions are their own. They have a right to them. They are theirs. So trying to help others where you can, yes, definitely. Taking on their emotional feelings as your own, no. Also think about maybe putting your phone on Do Not Disturb at night, prioritizing alone time, and definitely also asking for help when you need it. Number 8, strength can come in many different forms, and HSPs can be so strong. One of the comments I receive a lot that always hurts me a little bit to read is when people say that they think of themselves as weak or fragile people who cannot deal with life, or they beat themselves up for not being as productive as others, or for not being as strong as non-highly sensitive people. It hurts me a little because I used to feel the exact same way about myself, always wondering why I was often so tired and why a simple visit to the doctor's office takes me like 2 full days to emotionally recover from. Why I'm not able to work as many hours as some other people, why this, why that, especially when I was going through burnout for my corporate job. If you feel like this, let me tell you something. Strength comes in different forms. Strength of heart, strength of character. I always say there's tough and then there's strong. And while highly sensitive people might not be like super tough or sturdy in like the traditional sense, we can be so strong. Strength comes in different forms. For example, having a calming presence on those around you, or being super resilient, because even though, life tires you out sometimes, you still get up every single day and you do your best. Handling difficult situations and stress, overcoming obstacles, learning from your experiences, and when you fall, getting up again, and having the courage to having all of these strong emotional responses to life and not suppressing them. Genuinely wanting the best for those around you and always trying your best to be a good influence. Being saddened by the suffering of others, but also trying to make your little corner of the world a better place, and inspiring others to do the same just by being who you are. Your sensitive abilities can be a real superpower if you can accept them and use them to the fullest. It doesn't make you weak if the world is not always built with sensitivity in mind. Number 9, there is nothing that you can't do just because you're highly sensitive. So the world has a lot of toughness, enough of it. But it is not a coincidence that 20% of us are highly sensitive. This extra sensitive minority is there for a reason, and we have an important role in society. So don't shy away from the world because you have a lot to offer. For example, in work situations, we tend to be like strategic thinkers. We can look at complex issues and process them very deeply and come up with creative, out-of-the-box solutions. Like Elaine Aron writes in her book, The Highly Sensitive Person, HSPs are the advisors that balance out the tough warrior kings. We are thoughtful, we check their impulses, and we consider the possible effects of a decision before we advise it. Some HSPs are excellent leaders and can make for wonderful managers that can make their team feel comfortable and help every person to thrive. Because we have such vivid imagination and strong intuition, and because the way we think is less linear, we are also very innovative and creative and curious. We can help others to resolve conflict, so many great things that explain why natural selection has continued this highly sensitive trait. So yes, the world needs toughness too, but we have a lot of that. So instead of trying to change who we are, we can actually lean into and utilize our sensitive trait to balance things out more. Number 10, a little note on HSP and autism or ADHD. Lastly, I want to talk about something else important. So every time I make a video about high sensitivity, I get so many comments from people asking about the differences between HSP and autism, or sometimes they mention ADHD. Listen, I am not a doctor. I have read a lot about high sensitivity in books and online, and this is what I have read about it. The way I understand it is, yes, HSP and autism have some things in common. There is some overlap. They both affect how someone perceives and processes sensory information, but there are also differences, and they are in fact two different things that require different approaches, and the same goes for ADHD. I think the biggest reason why so many people talk about this in the comment section is that it is true that autism often goes undiagnosed, especially in women, and it can very well be that someone thinks of themselves as a highly sensitive person, but they are also on the autism spectrum. But you can also be a highly sensitive person and not be on the autism spectrum. And while some people in the comments just very respectfully ask, like, hey, this sounds a lot like autism, so what are the differences then? Or sharing their own personal experiences, like, I used to think I was a highly sensitive person, and now it turns out that I also am on the autism spectrum. Others go a step further and they say that HSP is not a real thing and that it is always autism. Or they tell me or someone else in the comments sharing their experiences like, hey, you're not highly sensitive, you have autism. Please, let's try and not diagnose others. It is so important to receive proper diagnosis, and that stuff can get very complicated. So let's leave that to the healthcare professionals and not tell other people what we think they have. And please, let's not deny the existence of high sensitivity. And if you have any questions about your own health, then I recommend just talking about them with your doctor. As I said in the beginning of the video, HSP is not a disorder or something that you can have or be diagnosed with. It is a trait like being tall or having green eyes. And so if you recognize yourself in the highly sensitive person and the tips and the self-care advice that you learn about it sounds good to you and helpful to you, then that is great. It's all about finding what works for you, what helps you to keep feeling good and happy and healthy and thrive in the world. So it is about finding what works for you. And again, if you feel like there might also be something else going on with you, just talk about it with your doctor instead of telling each other what we think they have. All right, we've come to the end of the video. I realized that this was a ton of information and I'm passionate about this stuff. I have a lot to say about it. So I'm sorry if it was a little overwhelming. Feel free to give this video another watch if you want to hear it again. I have a bunch more videos about high sensitivity, so I will leave the link to the playlist right there and in the description box. I especially recommend watching this video. It is about self-care for the highly sensitive person and what you can actually do to keep feeling good and happy and healthy and thrive in the world. So I will leave all of that in the description box, as well as some other helpful resources. Please let me know in the comments if you think that you are a highly sensitive person or not, and how long you've known it, and also what other topics you want me to talk about when it comes to high sensitivity on the channel. I always love it so much to connect with you about this topic and to hear what's on your mind. Also, feel free to share this video with someone else if you want them to perhaps understand high sensitivity a little better. I know that many of you have shared many of my videos before, and I thank you all so much. One last thing, because I'm so passionate about empowering sensitive people, I made a little art print with "I am sensitive, I am strong." It is available in my Etsy shop, and I will leave that down below as well. This is a digital download that you can print for yourself as a reminder, or maybe for someone else as a gift to help them appreciate their sensitive nature. It is one of your favorites in my Etsy shop, so I thought I'd mention it here too. As always, questions, comments, conversations down below. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you all again next week. Bye bye. I was so passionate when I was writing the script for this video that when I got up and looked at myself in the mirror, my entire face had gone like tomato red.